Welcome back to Let's Make a Game. In this video, I'm going to continue talking about how you can set up an inventory system for your game. More specifically, we will start to look at shops. So here we have the sample code. It looks much as it did in the last video, except that in the sidebar we now have this statement, you have 60 gold. If we go north and then east, we will find ourselves inside a rundown shop. And we can see that there's now a new category, as well as inventory and loose items. There are now items for sale as well. And when we hover over those items, we should get some new information. This is probably a bit small to see for you, but it says a brightly painted wooden shield, weight 50, cost 60. And this one similarly, as well as having a description and a weight, it also has a cost. So this one we can't buy even though we have the money. It costs 60 and we have 60, but we can't buy it because we're carrying too much. But if we drop this chest, well, now we can buy it. If we decide to buy the dagger instead, well, now we can't buy the shield because the shield is now too expensive. We now have only 30 gold, and so we can't afford the shield. So it's keeping track of two things. It's keeping track of the weight that we can carry in total, which it already was doing, but it's also keeping track of whether we can afford the listed cost of a particular item. So let's look at the code. We need to add a story caption passage in order to display how much gold we have. That's very simple. It just says you have $gold gold. We also, of course, need to give $gold a value, and I've decided to make it 60. We also need to add an extra slot to this array for some items. In slot 0, we have the name or the description. In slot 1, we have the weight. In slot 2, we have the location. And now we have a special slot that is only for items sold in shops, which is the cost. So these two items here, they have a description, a weight, a location, which is negative, and I'll explain that in a second, but they also have a cost. So this one costs 60 gold and this one costs 30 gold. So why is the location a negative? Well, we need to distinguish items that are just lying around that you can pick up from items that are for sale in a location, and therefore that you can only get if you have that amount of gold, and getting them costs you that amount of gold. So the location of the shield is -3, meaning that it's in location 3, but it's one of those special items that are for sale rather than just lying there to be picked up. And similarly, the dagger is in -3. If we wanted another shop somewhere else, we might make that location 10, and then the items that were for sale there, we'd give them the location -10. The code that we use for this is very similar to the code that we use for loose items. The differences arise from the fact that you have to pay money to get the items that are for sale. So let's go down to the section that relates to that. We have items for sale. Now, the previous categories, we had the heading, and then if there weren't any items, we just say there are no loose items or you have no items in your inventory. I decided to do it a different way. I could have done it the same way. The way that I did this, I could have done the other two categories, but I decided not to. And the way I decided to do the items for sale is we first check to see if there are any. And we'll know that there are items for sale in the current location if we have an item whose location, which is slot 2, is equal to 0 minus dollars location, because dollars location is where you are. And so if you're in location 3, an item that's for sale there has a location of -3. And the same would be true if there were other shops. So if that's the case, we set the temporary variable y to 1. And then if y equals 1, we have the heading and we have a table with all of the items that are for sale. It just seemed to make more sense because I didn't want to have you standing on a beach and then it said items for sale. There are no items for sale here. Why would there be items for sale on a beach? So I guess that's the thinking that made me do it in this slightly different way. So as before, we have a for loop that goes from 1 to items.length -1. In other words, it goes through all the items. It looks for items whose location is 0 minus $ location. It sets up some code into the temporary variable w, and then it prints w within a TD, which ensures that all of the pictures are on the same row. That's all the same as before, but there are slight differences. First of all, we add the cost as well as the weight into the title. Secondly, as well as being too heavy, an item can also be too expensive. So we have if items x1 plus z is greater than item underscore max, in other words, if the weight of the item plus the current weight of all of the items the player character has is greater than the maximum weight they can carry, or if gold is less than the cost of the item. Either of those things will make the item inaccessible. Because we don't know which one of those is true, one of those must be true, but we can't always say you are carrying too much to add this item because that might not be true, and we can't always say this item is too expensive because that might not be true. So we have to have an if for each of them. If items x1 plus z is greater than item underscore max, then we add to the description, you're carrying too much. And if the cost is greater than the gold, we add to the description, this item is too expensive. And if both are true, we'll end up adding both. If they can buy the item, as well as changing the location, which is items x2, to 0, which means in the player's backpack, we also change gold. We change $gold to $gold minus the cost of the item. In other words, we deduct the cost of the item. And then having created that, we put it in the cell of an HTML array, which means that everything's side by side, which is what we want. So you probably noticed at least a couple of problems with the way that the code currently works. First of all, there's only one shield and one dagger. Once you buy the shield, there's no more shields in the shop. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of the fiction of the game. Why would a shop have only 2 items for sale? You probably also thought, well, shouldn't I be able to sell items to the shop, probably for less than the shop would sell them for? Well, those are things that we will add in future videos, but I will leave it there for now. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.